Geek Out! Bleep Blop Bloop gamers, this is the inaugural edition of Video Game Archives. If you've been listening to the Geek Out Network, we don't really talk a lot about it. I mean, we'll mention video games in passing on the main series. Chris had a one-off episode about Friday the 13th, the game, on his Friday the 13th show. But we really haven't done a deep dive into video games. It's something I've wanted to talk about for a while. And I've talked about with the co-host for this, Zach Williams. He's, I've always been pushing for Legend of Zelda. He's been pushing for Mario. And you know what? If you're going to do something about video games, you probably have to do it about Mario. So here we are talking Super Mario Brothers. Zach, say hey to the kids at home.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, no problem, man. Yeah. Anytime, man. Anytime. Or at least, once every 4 weeks. So we're going to follow perhaps the biggest mascot in all of video gaming. Certainly the one that saved the video game industry after the Atari crash in 1983. Though we're going to go, with this episode, we're going to go to his roots. Before 1983, before there's an NES, before he even has his own game named after him. We're going back to 1981. We're going to the original Donkey Kong. This was the game that basically made Nintendo a household name, even though they didn't have a console of their own to put it out on. It wasn't my gateway into Mario, but it was a gateway for the rest of the world. And with this, if you guys aren't, too young, I was just going to say too old, but I guess you could be if you were fought in World War II. But who knows? Maybe those World War II guys are savvy. They, you're chasing Donkey Kong as he captures Pauline and whisks her off 4 stages. It's very arcade-like because you're just playing those 4 ad nauseum. Trying to get the high score, not necessarily going for completion. So, yeah. Zach, let's dive in. Do you have any memories of the original Donkey Kong, either arcade or otherwise?
Well, most of my earliest memories of playing Nintendo games, and especially Mario games, was every Thanksgiving I would visit my grandparents, and they had a Nintendo Entertainment System that was in a room that was separated from the rest of the family. So me and my younger cousins, we would always go in there, and then we would just play every NES cartridge that they had. One of them was Donkey Kong, which was also bundled with Donkey Kong Jr. So I would play that, and that was my introduction into Donkey Kong, and I was 4 at this time, and I didn't know that at this time that it was originally an arcade game that was very popular. So my experience has just been dealing with the noises and the music that came on that particular cartridge, and then it wasn't until finding out a whole lot later on in my life, once Donkey Kong 64 was released, that there was an arcade version of Donkey Kong that was not completely different, but had some very slight changes from the Nintendo Entertainment System release. One of them being, of course, the cement mixing level is just not featured in the Nintendo Entertainment System version at all. Mm-hmm. But otherwise, as far as arcade to console versions go at the time, it looks phenomenal, and it still holds up to this day. Like the sounds are great, the color palette is pristine. Give a quick example. I was playing the NES Classic recently, and I was noticing their version of Pac-Man completely different from the arcade. Like the colors are muted and whatnot. But again, still plays how it should be.
Yeah, I think it was the most popular port of Donkey Kong was on the ColecoVision, which a lot of people nowadays don't even know what the hell that is anymore. But yeah, I mean, it would port it on the Intellivision, the Odyssey 2, the Atari, of course. It was a huge deal. And originally, Nintendo, Nintendo of America is based out of Seattle, or at least they were. I don't know if they still are, but they had released it. The test market was just a handful of pizza parlors in Seattle, and people would be pouring quarters into those things. Like they would really respond to it. And if you've never played the original Donkey Kong, Mario isn't called Mario in this. He's called Jumpman.
Yep.
just because that's all you do. And he can take fall damage, which is weird, you know.
That is definitely a rude awakening. It's not only fall damage, but it's also the most sensitive fall damage. Like anything that's greater than his height, which isn't that great to begin with. So, like for instance, the infamous 75 meters level, and there's all these steps towards the top where there's the elevators. You have to tackle each one individually. If you try to skip one, you fall to your death.
Yeah, it's really like for a character that is known for jumping. I guess the fall damage eventually works its way back into the mythos, albeit not for like another 15 years. Yeah, though I think you can you take fall damage in Arcade Mario Bros? I don't think you can. No, yeah. No. So, you see, my gateway into this wasn't actually the arcade, though I have since played arcade versions of Donkey Kong, and it wasn't Donkey Kong 64. It was actually, I had the Game Boy Enhanced remake.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
That's a great version to play.
It's a fantastic, it's
endless.
There's like 100 levels, and I've actually beaten that game, and it gets really fucking hard by the end. But for that opening, if that's the definitive version of this game, in my opinion, because it starts out, it's the 4 arcade levels, and you're just like, cool, I've played this before. And then Donkey Kong like wakes up, and he's like, by the way, I'm not done. And he like takes Pauline, and Donkey Kong Jr. gets involved, and you're chasing him across all these worlds. Like there's like 100 levels that get progressively more difficult, and it's one of the first games I ever beat from top to bottom, and I felt so proud. Yeah. So that was, and then later, I found out it was like originally an arcade game, and originally, it had been ported to so many consoles before all that. But have you done any research about the creation of the game or of the character or of Jumpman?
Most of the research that I did was just around the culture around arcade games, in particular Donkey Kong at that time. Mm-hmm. So just Donkey Kong came at a time where Nintendo just wanted to bring something new and give something for everyone to play. And they tried games in the past, and American audiences just were not jumping on this because they were too similar to what they've already been playing, like Pac-Man and Space Invaders, and they were just itching for something new. And when it came to Donkey Kong, it exploded.
Yeah. Shigeru Miyamoto was a lead designer on this. He was he had been working with Nintendo for that long. So a lot of that, the idea of this gorilla with a necktie, which I feel like that's something I should probably get, like a Donkey Kong necktie. Not a tie with Donkey Kong on it, but a red necktie with DK.
You can get that on Etsy.
Okay, cool. Yeah.
I had one and it went missing.
Oh, well, bastards. Thieving swine. Yeah. No, I feel like, and the idea is when Miyamoto was thinking of a stubborn animal, and of course, because originally I think he was called, I've heard rumors he was called Monkey Kong, but I think the what Miyamoto ended up saying was like, no, I wanted to combine Kong, which was very synonymous with like King Kong, with a term with a stubborn animal, which would be donkey, so Donkey Kong. And then yeah.
Well, I mean, stubborn donkey makes a lot more sense because when I was growing up, I was told that it was stupid monkey, and I don't he's anything but stupid. I mean, he's using barrels resourcefully to absolutely squish you.
Yeah, and he can use the weird spring things in 75 meters. Or is that 25 meters? I'm trying to remember all the meters now. No, it's
75 meters is the elevators. The whoop.
Wow. Yeah. That's where he's got the springs. Yeah, and then he has the weird fire spirits in 100 meters.
Oh yeah, it gets so ruthless.
Yeah, but like most arcade games, it's a game without end. Though it is one of the first games with like a linking narrative between levels. It's not just it's not just Space Invaders where, hey, it's another wave of aliens, or hey, it's like missile control or asteroids or whatever. So,
it's you have your conclusion and then it just gets cut off. So you get to the top, there's Pauline, there's a heart, and then you think it gets resolved right then and there, and then Donkey Kong just snatches her, and then you go on to the next stage.
Yeah. Back to 25 meters again. Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I always felt that was pretty revolutionary. Now, as for Jumpman, who again was called Jumpman because of what he does, another idea I've heard batted around for his name was Mr. Video. I don't know if you've ever heard that before.
I've heard that. I haven't heard anything beyond that.
Yeah, it was dropped apparently pretty quickly. Yeah. And then between this and later versions of Donkey Kong, Jumpman's identified as Mario because apparently the landlord of Nintendo of America was this giant, like, Italian man named Mario, and he left an impression with the development staff, and they're like, well, he's Mario now. And they made him a plumber because they liked that, like, working man sensibility.
Exactly.
Which you can, yeah.
And also just his design in general, just because of the graphical limitations at the time. Like why he has a hat, why he has a mustache. And also one thing I found really interesting is that in Donkey Kong, Mario, he has his colors are swapped. So he has red overalls instead of blue.
Yeah. And of course Luigi, because there is no player 2 at this point. Luigi doesn't even and it's not even Peach. It's not even Prince. Here's the thing: do you prefer calling her Toadstool or do you prefer calling her Peach?
Peach. It's honestly, she's been Peach longer than she's been Toadstool at this point.
That's a fair point. I guess the same argument would apply for Eggman and Dr. Robotnik.
Exactly. Actually, another thing that's really funny is that going back to Donkey Kong. So in Donkey Kong Country, Cranky Kong's supposed to be the Donkey Kong from the arcade games, giving this advice, saying like, "Well, back in my day, I threw barrels," and there was. But what's funny is like the age gap between Donkey Kong the arcade release and Donkey Kong Country for the Super Nintendo. It's actually a smaller gap than the Super Nintendo version of Donkey Kong Country to Donkey Kong Country Returns on the Wii. So what I find interesting is that why is it the DK that we know today super old and giving advice?
It's a sliding timeline, man. It's like Marvel Comics.
Exactly.
They don't age in real time, but yeah, that's true. Which effectively makes Donkey Kong Jr. the Donkey Kong Prime now, I guess.
Exactly.
Because he just kind of stopped appearing after Super Mario Kart. They're just like, he doesn't exist anymore.
Yep.
Yeah.
Push up and Mario Baseball, and that was it. Anyways.
Yeah. And I think he's like in one of the later. I think he's in Mario Tennis 64. You can use him.
Oh yeah, he was ruthless.
Instead of Diddy for some reason. Yeah. Which was weird because Diddy existed. Diddy was in a more popular game, but yeah, he gets left out. But yeah, I mean, this is a game that I certainly grew up with. Playing in my room on my Game Boy for like hours on end, just poring over these levels, and yeah, it was a lot of fun. This game is certainly what gave us Nintendo, really, and this is the birth of it all. This is, I think, the only thing that we, Zach and I could do that would be more prototypical would be either Pong or Asteroids, because this is really the birth of modern gaming. So this is a good choice for the inaugural episode of Video Game Archives. I think within the next later today, I might be posting a Twitch stream, which might include the original Donkey Kong. Geek Out does have a Twitch. It's just Geek Out. just search for it. Yeah. So, I mean, do you have any other memories of DK before we close the arcade but leave the lights on?
Well, I mean, I actually like to get into the mechanics of Donkey Kong and why I appreciate it so much. Comparing that to some of the other arcade games that were around that time period, it was one of the few games that I found that was tough but fair. So even though it could definitely be ruthless at times, like for instance, some of the enemies would just swarm the area where you need to go, and there was no way around it. It didn't seem impossible, like most arcade games where you're just like constantly putting in quarters. And when I first started playing this, I didn't really get the point of jumping over things in order to get points, I would always try to like take a ladder and see if I can outsmart the barrels coming down. And then same thing with the hammer. Like, well, it was really awesome to feel invincible and just be able to demolish everything in front of you or behind you or above you. Again, I didn't really get the concept of getting points until I was a lot older when I realized you could get extra lives by doing this. And if you did it fast enough, then you could get a big enough bonus.
Yeah.
Yeah, so the controls in particular I found rather interesting. For instance, there were sometimes where it was precise, but sometimes I felt it was just a little bit too tight. One of the big examples I can think of is whenever Mario is climbing a ladder, and even though he's at the top of the ladder, you still have to get him to do like a turnaround motion. And then it's really tough to do that when you know you're planning ahead what you need to do, where you're at the top of the ladder and like immediately you need him to jump. But unfortunately, you can't sometimes get the game to do what you need it to do. And especially if you're playing this on an old arcade cabinet and the joystick's been worn down a bit.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I'll be honest, I usually don't use the hammer when I play Donkey Kong. Like, the only level I really use it on is 100 meters if I'm getting swarmed by the fire spirits. Because,
exactly.
Yeah, I usually can time those jumps over the barrels just fine. I'm pretty solid there. I think it might barely be there for 75, and I don't think you need it for 50. But yeah, I don't usually even bother with the ladder. I usually just power on through. Or not
to mention the items that you could pick up, like the handkerchief and
parasol,
the purse.
Yeah, just to get those. Because I've never been particularly good at the high score games, unless it's like when I'm playing something like Pac-Man or Miss Pac-Man, I'm not playing for the high score. I'm playing for survival, which does me fine. But and the same comes to Donkey Kong or Donkey Kong Jr., Donkey Kong 3, if I really want to get out there. But I just play to get to the next level. I'm more achievement oriented than that, or than goal oriented, I guess. So, yeah, that's how I take it. So you usually go for the points?
I guess it depends on how close I am to get a game over I am.
Fair enough.
Once if I'm on my last life, then yeah, I'll try to start farming for points or seeing opportunities where like barrels or the fire spirits are clumped together. Then I can use the hammer and whale on them. Otherwise, I try to do speed runs as much as you can do for those games. Another thing that I find interesting is when you do multiple playthroughs and it gets a lot faster, particularly the 75-meter stage with the elevators, and you're just sitting on the edge just trying to time when the heck can I climb up this ladder, because they jump far and they jump really high, and you're trying to find like the right, very precise opening. And then there are some times where you're climbing up the ladder and then the elevator just kind of ducks right under your butt as you're going up.
Yeah. Just enough where you die from the fall damage.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it's like, I mean, you're talking tough but fair. 75. Would you say 75 meters is the hardest level of the 4?
Well, I mean, actually, like it is a very unforgiving level at times, but I think I would have to give it to the cement mixing level.
Oh.
I mean, this level was specifically nixed from the home console version.
Right.
So I think that stage could be pretty unforgiving as far as the conveyor belt and just being like swarming with fire everywhere.
Sure, yeah. That one's tough too. I still have to give it to 75, and I think the easiest is probably 100 meter.
Yeah.
Just all you have to do is cross the little things.
Well, it's cool in the aspect that you can tackle the stage however way you want. Mm-hmm. So you can just start off from the top where Donkey Kong's resting and then tackle this, which is work your way down, or maybe do like each floor or maybe one side. Mm-hmm. Then you get to a point where the enemies are just like drowning the final switch or whatever, and maybe they're on one floor but the hammer's on the other floor and you can't get to it, or you're just running away from them. I was playing this at the arcade recently when I was visiting my sister in the Outer Banks. There was this arcade that I hit like probably an hour away from where she is, called a Flippers Arcade, and then they had this whole dedicated retro section. So I was playing Donkey Kong, and it was one of the few arcade cabinets that was working at the time, and I couldn't even get past the first stage because it was so ruthless. I don't know if it was like a difficulty setting that the arcade cabinet was set up on, but when I finally beat that stage, for some reason it jumped straight to 100 meters. I didn't get to play 75 meters or 50 meters, if you will.
Yeah.
Anyways, the enemies were just swarming me, and I did not have a chance.
I wonder if it was a problem with
the
RAM or something, where they're moving faster.
Maybe. Yeah, it's definitely more sadistic than I remember it. I need to play the NES version and see if that's the case.
Have you ever been to Atlas Arcade on H Street?
I haven't. It's just been out of the way from my usual hangout spots. I need to just find a day to schedule it on my calendar and go with friends and really appreciate it. And also go when it's also not crowded. So, it's still the summer and the college kids aren't hitting it up. That's probably my best bet.
Sure. It doesn't help that it's not metro accessible at all either.
Oh,
well. Bastards.
Yeah.
But we love your establishment. Well, yeah. You got anything else, Zach, before we hang our hats, our Mario hats on this inaugural episode?
Yeah, I mean, as far as obviously I could go more talking about Donkey Kong and just briefly I could talk about how Donkey Kong got its second wind with the King of Kong and Fistful of Quarters.
Oh yeah.
And how that documentary featured two top players going at it.
Billy Mitchell,
even years after that movie, there was another champion that took place, and then there were just like, I don't know, probably 3, 4, or 5 more that wanted bragging rights, and then to the point where you get one person goes for the high score and then decides to retire from playing Donkey Kong competitively, and they're introducing kill screens to everyone, and then I just think it's wonderful that like more life got breathed into this arcade game.
Well, you know, and outside of that, I feel like arcade games are kind of like everyone's digging the retro culture these days, and I fucking love it. We're starting to see like more and more pinball machines, more and more arcade cabinets. I am, you know, obviously you've got an NES Classic now. You know, Super Nintendo Classic comes out in a matter of weeks at this point. You know, we are in a. It's not even I guess it's a rebirth, a renaissance or something like that, where we're like, it's the afterbirth.
Yeah, I agree.
I don't know if I'm selling this.
Yes.
But no, I'm digging it. And then, you know, that's part of the reason why we wanted to go vintage. And, you know, we'll stay in the 80s, certainly for a bit. Here's a question, and we'll go ahead and get to the bottom of this while we're on the show. Do you want to go Donkey Kong Jr. next, or do you want to go Mario Brothers Arcade next?
Well, if this is going to be a Mario-related series, Mario has a very minor role in Donkey Kong Jr., and I don't think I could talk about it nearly as much as I can Donkey Kong just because it hasn't had the same impact. Sorry, what's the second choice? Going to Mario Brothers?
Mario Brothers Arcade, not Super Mario Brothers. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I'm down with that route.
And that means we can talk all the incarnations, like the bonus stages in Super Mario Brothers 3, Mario Clash on the Virtual Boy, and I guess the Luigi Bros. If you have the Super Mario 3D World Save on your Wii U, if I remember correctly, you can get a color swapped or palette swapped.
Oh! I know what you're talking about. It's no Super Luigi Bros. That's it's if you have both of what was that compilation called? It was NES
Remix.
Yeah, NES Remix. If you have both 1 and 2, then you can play Super Luigi Brothers.
Well, I do.
Yeah. No. Wait, hang on.
Yeah.
No, actually, hang on. So I think it was NES Remix 2 that had Super Luigi Brothers, and then having both installments allowed you to play like this tournament setting where you're playing Dr. Mario, some other game that escapes me, and then Super Luigi Brothers, and then you're trying to go for the high score.
Oh, there you have it. Yeah. So all those incarnations of Mario Brothers Arcade will get touched on next time as we pop another one out of Are we putting them in the archives, or are we taking them out of the archives? That's rhetorical. I don't even know. Well, let's put this in our archives for now. And Zach, thanks again for coming on for the inaugural episode of Video Game Archives. And we'll continue.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, no problem at all. We'll continue our Mario deep dive next time. All right.
Cool.
This has been another installment. Bleep, blop, bloop. This has been another Geek Out production. If you enjoyed what you heard, hey, we've got a special episode every Friday. Of course, there's the usual catching up show every Wednesday. And you get book club episodes just about every Tuesday these days. Thanks for listening.